Professor Justice Rajesh Tandon, sir, Honorable Justice, former Justice Uttarakhand High Court. With a round of applause, please welcome Professor Ingogo, MSA, Director and Head, Bradford Law School, England. Please welcome with a round of applause Professor Neeti Shikha, Professor at Professor Dr. Aditya Tomar, sir, Professor Dr. Shefali Raizadha, ma'am, and all the members of the organizing team. A roaring applause once again. Welcome Professor Ingobo and Neeti ma'am from Bradford Law School, England. Please settle down, everyone. Thank you so much. I'll request you to please close the door. So I'll request all the students to settle down. I think today is an opportunity to understand the legal system in England and to go ahead with mutual collaborations with Bradford Law School, England. I've personally visited Bradford. It's a beautiful place. And I think we are coming up with some exchange programs which will be helpful for all the students and faculty members. So let's begin with today's lecture. To begin with today's lecture, I'll most humbly and with pleasure welcome Professor Dr. Aditya Tomar, Additional Director and Joint Head, Amity Law School, and also the Head of Internationalization to present the welcome address. Professor Aditya Tomar.
Thank you, Dr. Sumitra. Good morning, all the students. First of all, I would like to take the privilege to welcome our guest, Professor Ngabu Amish, Director and Head, Bradford Law School, and Miss Neeti Shikha, Faculty, Bradford Law School, England. They are here to enlighten us for the further collaborations, and they'll deliver some lectures on some special issues. It may be environmental regulations, climate change, or the other technology laws. So I welcome on behalf of the Amity Law School. Now, I would like to extend my heartiest welcome to our host, our mentor, Shri Rajesh Tandon, sir, who joined us recently and heading Amity Judicial Academy and Amity Law Foundation. I extend my warm welcome to my colleague, Dr. Shefali Raizadha, and all the faculty members. And lastly, welcome all the students. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Dr. Aditya Tomar, sir is also heading the internationalization wing at Amity Law School, Noida. Well, students, ladies and gentlemen, and dignitaries of the dais, let me inform you that Amity Law School, Noida is one of the largest law schools in the Asia-Pacific region. And we have a highly specialized international cell, and we could go ahead with more than 3 and 4 MOUs with Australia, with US, and with other countries. Having said so, it's my proud privilege to now welcome His Lordship, Honorable Professor Justice Rajesh Tandon, sir, to address this august gathering. Please welcome His Lordship, Honorable Justice Rajesh Tandon.
Thank you very much, the Master of Ceremonies and our Professor, Dr. Sumitra Singh ji. Today, it is a very solemn affair today when we are having the guests from abroad. On the dais, Dr. Aditya Tomar ji, Dr. Shefali Raizadha ji, Neeti Shikha, Faculty of Bradford Law School, England, Director and Head of Bradford Law School, Inglo, Imbesh. I welcome all. Today, the topic which has been chosen regarding environmental factor. Regarding environmental factor, I will just illustrate one example before the professors of London that how the environmental factor affects the climate, or in other words, how the climate affects the environment. When I was a judge in the Human Rights Commission, I have witnessed environmental factor as well as climate change. You must have heard the name of Kedarnath tragedy that happened in 2013. In 2013, all of a sudden, the climate was changed. And when the climate was changed, the result was that the entire environment was affected, and due to the environment, there was large number of tragedies. The whole state of Kedarnath was in trouble. The whole, at least 10,000 people have died there, and all the cars were drowned in the water itself. These are the tragedies which have happened due to climate change and due to the environment. Today's seminar, I am thankful to Dr. Bhavnaji and all that for assisting me in this seminar. This topic of seminar, or all the things are in the process for the long time, and our founder, President Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan is the guideline. He guides us for everything, and I am thankful to our founder president who has always guided me for this, choosing the present seminar and present topic of the seminar. He has been a very kind for us for this assembly and all that, and we are here because of Dr. A.K. Chauhan, Dr. Ashok Kumar Chauhan, to whom I treat him as a wish guru in the legal field and in the literary field. And all these students who are present here, they must clap to our Dr. Ashok Kumar Chauhan for this nice gathering and for the nice program. One more illustration of the climate and the environment I will tell before you. You must have heard that in Nainital, from Tallital to Mallital, the horses were going with the students, with the children and all that. There was a pollution, and due to pollution, the public at large was affected. And therefore, when I was in High Court, we have to stop the going of the horses from in the road itself, that is from Tallital to Mallital, and we have to shift them to another place, that is Sukhatal, and all the horses are now placed at Sukhatal. They are not allowed to come on the street. These are the illustrations of the environment factors. There are so many illustrations, but our chief guest will speak on the environment and the climate change. I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Lordship. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is an opportunity to learn so much from the illuminated dais. Well, there is something that binds Amity Law School Noida and Bradford Law School England, and that is social inclusion and students' mobility. Because of the students' mobility only, Bradford Law School, England, and Amity Law School, Noida is one of the favorites of the law students across the globe. We have international connects across the globe, and I generally tell my students, or wherever I go, if I put any post on LinkedIn, it is viewed by the people in 192 countries. It is mainly because at Amity Law School, Noida, we get enough opportunities for internationalizing legal education. Having said so, everybody, today we have on the dais Dr. Neeti Shikha. Before joining the University of Bradford Law School, Neeti worked as an associate dean at the Indian School of Public Policy in New Delhi. She has worked as the head of the Center for Insolvency and Bankruptcy, Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, a think tank under the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. She holds a PhD from National Law University, Jodhpur, and LLM from University College London, UK. She is the recipient of the prestigious Hague Scholarship and has pursued courses in private international law at the Hague Academy, Netherlands. She has held academic positions at various law and business schools in India and Singapore, including Stansfield College, Singapore, National Law University, Jodhpur, Ford School of Management, and other colleges. She has given guest lectures at all the illustrious colleges and universities in India and England. And Madam has published widely in the leading journals and newspapers and has authored two leading books, namely Changing Paradigm of Corporate Governance in India and Corporate Governance Principles and Policies. It is with much delight and pleasure that I would humbly invite Dr. Neeti Shikha, faculty lecturer at the University of Bradford University Law School, to present her address. Dr. Neeti Shikha.
Thank you, Ms. Mitra. Honorable members on the dais, Justice, Honorable Justice Tandon, Professor Tomar, Professor Shifali, and all esteemed colleagues, and most importantly, my dear students. I've taught in India for over 15 years, and all the students know me as student champion, because the most important people in this room today is not us, it's you. Having said that, I've been there, and I understand that nobody wants to listen to professors. This is the age where you have the knowledge on tablet, so why are you here? And I have been literally forced by my university then to be present despite my unwillingness, literally captured in the room, doors locked, we couldn't escape. And only incentive then was the free food that we got at the university. I don't know what your incentive is, but one incentive that I can assure you that you'll get is listening Professor Ngobo, who is a great scholar in this field, and just the way I am very concerned and connected to my students in India and now in the UK, she does much larger role in the University of Bradford. Now, having said that, my dear students, don't go by the topic that you see here, because climate change, I have been the receiver at the receiving end of climate change, but not a scholar in climate change. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to do justice to the environmental, topic that we have here, environmental climate change. But in my own area of expertise, which is corporate governance and insolvency, and my short stint at ISPP, Indian School of Public Policy, we did interact with Delhi government on various ways that they try to bring policies which could be, which could work on the ground for, in the case of environment. I'm going to very briefly talk about it. So, I was just thinking when I entered the room that what do I talk about environment? But when I reflected back and I realized that 2013 Companies Act has a lot to talk about environment. Because for the first time in India, under Indian law, we codified directors' duties. And one of the codified laws, one of the provision under the act was that director has a duty towards environment. Now, let me tell you that the book that Professor Ms. Sumitra mentioned was The Changing Paradigm, where I was one of the few, I will rather say the initial scholars only after my supervisor to write on the New Companies Act. We talked about transplant effect because India really looks up to UK for multiple laws. And we realized that the provision towards environment has been sort of borrowed from the UK. But the way our parents always say, don't look at neighbors, khud ko dekho. Sorry, President Gobu, I'll use some Hindi jargons. seldom get time to speak in Hindi with my students here. So yes, khud ko dekho. Likewise, you know, everybody have their own peculiarities, and India did the right thing to codify a director's duties toward environment. But in England, there are parallel duties running towards other stakeholders like creditors, shareholders, suppliers, and then the laws, the Companies Act 2006 in the UK gives a guidance to the directors that in case of conflicting interest, how do you prioritize? Sadly, in India, we forgot to give that kind of guidance because, at the drafting level, we try to bring the transplant of the UK provisions in India. Now, it is good for India, I would say, because in India, the duty of a director is at the same pedestal towards environment as other stakeholders, including bondholders, creditors. I mean, I would not really say creditors because the court jurisprudence has evolved so much that creditors are given higher priorities, especially in the waterfall mechanism, but with other stakeholders. But when it comes to effectuating that law, we somehow sort of failed. We failed because Justice Tandon is here and he would know that when a claim comes to you, sir, and you have a parallel jurisprudence running where you have to prioritize the creditors, and at the same time, environmental claims are there to be handled, how do you choose between the two? And many times, my interaction with NCLT and NCLT members and working for a short stint at Supreme Court was that, even judges need that guidance because they have to act within the ambit of law. So there, to some extent, Companies Act sort of paused and did not. To make it further difficult for your lordships, but good for the environmentalists was that we have a provision of CSR. India is the first country in the world that codified corporate social responsibility. And if you look at Schedule 7, there is, contribution towards environment. Innovation in the environmental studies is a part of CSR. So if we talk in the corporate law domain, we have enough emphasis given in law on environment, but sadly, there is no spirit, it's not in spirit. And why I would say so is that firstly, you have hardly heard of a derivative action being brought against a company for environmental claims in India. Professor Ngobo will talk about a very old case she has researched in great details, Bhopal gas tragedy. Probably you'd mention that, Professor. But that was undertaught under Companies Act, though there's a provision in law, you don't have. Even the case of Maggie that was banned in India, which was against health, it was not under Companies Act. What recourse did we take against the company under Companies Act? So that is something where we have sort of, been limited. The second area of my work has been insolvency. And in insolvency, you have a waterfall mechanism in case a company is being wound up, they have to pay their dues to the stakeholder, to the key debtors of the company. There has been cases where a company has done environmental wrong and there is a pending environmental claim, but that is a very unsettled ground. Environmental claims capture under any other debt that the company owes and not as a priority debt, which means, and by the way, it can also be extinguished under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which means if you have not claimed for it and the company's insolvency is true, you cannot bring back the claim. I'm reminded of a case, Caparo Industries, Adam Cape Industries, a famous case that was referred to in Vodafone case, a very famous tax case, Vodafone case. In this case, though Vodafone case referred Adam case in a different light, but this case was about a company that was making asbestos, and it was working in over 200 countries, manufacturing asbestos, which was causing health hazards. And there was it called a disease called asbestosis, and a case was started against the parent company claiming insurance for the employees from the parent company, similar to Bhopal gas tragedy. Interestingly, I mean, I'll not go into details of that. We refer this case under lifting of corporate veil. I'll not go into the details of the corporate aspects, corporate law aspects, but to give you very briefly that when the Adam Cape industry case started, was initiated, several companies and subsidiaries of this company started winding up. Now, with the winding up of these companies in different countries, their environmental claims, their employees' health claims got extinguished. So, I mean, at least today also in India, if the case would have been there, you wouldn't be able to do much about it because there is a vacuum in the law to prioritize how to deal with environmental claims during insolvency. Because there's a fallback, clause of the other debts. The point I'm trying to tell you here is that environment is important. It has its presence in various laws. What is required is giving teeth, and you can be a great champion to that. Because sometimes, my dear students, it's not that government does not want to do it. I mean, I have been part of the ministry, especially in the research side for almost 3 years. And I know that government has very good intention. But what happens is, my dear students, that somebody has to bring to the forefront. So it is for you to take the challenge, that responsibility, that you delve into these sort of untalked about areas of law and write something about it. Not every writing has to be a fantastic research piece. I always believe that whatever you write is leading to a discourse, is initiating a discourse. So those of you interested in my field of research, happy to connect with you. There's some very good papers coming on environmental claims and insolvency. ESG has become a next big thing in corporate governance, where company has to give regard to the environment. ESG has become a big thing today, but has always been there in the spirit of corporate laws. You can look at the Cadbury Committee report, the Greenberry Committee report, from where our corporate governance norms have stemmed. It has been part of it, but now it has been spirited through, and it has been formed up through ESG. I'm happy to share that at the ministry, I was part of the committee that was designing the business and human rights, responsibility measure metrics that company had to meet while reporting. So that's another area for you to research. Is very recent. It has not still been fully effected. So time is for you today. Use technology, use your mind, use your passion, and each one of you could make a difference in this in this environment, for our environment. And on that note, I'll stop, because there's a famous saying, it's blasphemy in base to praise Plato. So if I talk about environment in front of such a known scholar, I'll be literally undermining her. I'll be making myself as a fool and undermining her. Her scholarship. So I'll stop here, and over to you, Professor Ngobo. I think we have a detailed presentation, of her profile. I will just say one line: she's a great scholar and a great student champion. So that's how I see her as. And on this note, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neeti. Very well said. Well, everybody, as India takes up the G20 presidency with one earth, one family, and one future, topics like corporate governance or insolvency or environmental changes are pertinent to all of us to understand. With National Education Policy 2020, every Indian citizen now is a global citizen. With Sabka Saath and Sabka Vikas, I'm sure India is going to take lead in times to come in different aspects of life. Having said so, ladies and gentlemen, today, as ma'am said, we have the champion of the heart of students, Professor Ngobo. Professor Ngobo has extensive experience in higher education, both within and outside UK. Professor has led the development of innovative market relevant degree schemes, portfolio reviews, and diversification of delivery formats to cater to a wider audience, maximize the resources, and improve the student learning experience, including external engagement and skill development. Ngobo obtained her PhD from the Center for Energy, Petroleum, and Mineral Law and Policy. And she graduated with the first class from Nigeria Law School and distinction from the University of Wales, Cardiff. She is a former British Council Chevening Scholar and a Ford Foundation Doctoral Fellow. Prior to her academic career, she practiced as a barrister and solicitor in Nigeria, having been called to the Nigerian bar. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome Professor Ngobo MSA, Director and Head, Bradford Law School, England, for her address. Professor Ngobo.
I'm being a teacher, carrying all my documents around. That's what you do. Right. Is this the speak? No, I don't have a PPT. I'm just going to speak. So, first, let me put on my glasses because I can see close but not far. And I want to see your faces. So, good morning. First of all, I want to say thank you, Aditya Sumatra, for all you did to put this together and for us being here. I need to be closer? Right, okay. So yeah, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for all putting this together and organizing at such short notice. I was overwhelmed with the welcome when I came in this morning, and I'm deeply, deeply appreciative. Sir, George Tandon, Professor Toma, Professor Shifali, and all the other colleagues I've met since I came here. It is a privilege to be here. First and foremost, I bring you greetings from Bradford. I bring you greetings from my Vice Chancellor, Professor Shirley Condon. And I represent the ethos and the vision of the University of Bradford as an inclusive university. The fact that we are an inclusive university, just like it's taken for granted because we have won every award there is to win around inclusivity. Bradford itself is a very diverse city. We have the youngest population in Europe. And 2025, we are the city of culture. So I invite you to come over, come join us, come share in that diverse culture. I think the very fact that I am here today as the head of the School of Law, University of Bradford, speaks to our diversity. That Professor Chika is part of our school speaks to that culture of diversity. We have students from well over 130 countries at the University of Bradford, and we ensure that each and every one is respected, each and every culture is respected. And beyond that, there's a project we're working on called Decolonizing the Curriculum. And by that, we're saying that knowledge systems come from everywhere, and therefore we have to respect and include knowledge systems from across the world. That from wherever you come from, there is a knowledge that is relevant, and that knowledge must be mainstreamed. I think for too long, we have thought of knowledge being up-down and being north-south. But I think in so many areas, including in the area of environment, which I will speak about, we have shown that knowledge comes sometimes south-north, and that knowledge can come down-up as well. And so those are some of the ethos around Bradford and why I am really, really proud to be part of that university and to champion their cause. Like Sir said, the reason why we're here is that we want to build collaborations. Why do we want to build collaborations? There's so many reasons. But again, you mentioned it. Today we live in a globalized world. Nobody is an island and nobody can live in an insular world. As lawyers, law has become more and more global in nature. International law permeates every aspect of law. So when Dr. Shika talks about insolvency law, when she talks about corporate governance, there are so many rules that have been evolved globally that impacts on all of us. And then when we talk about corporate governance, we're looking at global multinational companies that operate in different countries. You talk about insolvency. Yes, we may talk about insolvency of a small company here that you dissolve, but invariably you're also talking about the big corporations when they get into mergers, acquisitions. What are the implications? There's so much that happens at a global level that we cannot afford to be insular in our approach to law. The other really big thing that is happening is that our world is changing. It's scary for some of us who are older because it is changing so fast. And the world I knew, the learning systems I knew, is so different from the way I teach my students today. But I think it is an exciting time for your generation because you have at your fingertips tools that I wish I had when I was younger. Sometimes I tell my students that if I had what you had, I would have flown. Because you have so much information, tools, opportunities, pathways at your disposal in how you learn, how you practice law. When I was a law student, for example, I had to report my law cases in the library. And Saturdays were our law reporting days. So every Saturday, first thing in the morning, you go as a team because there are so many law reports that any library can have. And if you don't get a particular law report on time, it's gone for the day. So you plan ahead and you say, you'll get that one, you'll get that one, you'll get that one. And we go almost like an army into the library, and then you begin to change. And that's how we spend our Saturdays. And for my students today, that's nothing. They've got Westlaw, LexisNexis at their fingertips. It tells them which law has been updated, what the new rules are. It's amazing. And those are some of the tools that you have at your disposal. But beyond that, there are knowledge systems in various databases that you can access as law students. And part of what we do at the University of Bradford is to make sure that you've got access to that. But we don't want to keep that to just ourselves. We want to share in that. We want to collaborate in that. We want our students to come to India and learn from one of the strongest democracies in the global South. The systems, how law works, the institutions. Our students came recently to India. They went to your Supreme Court. They went to your parliament. They're learning. 2 days ago, I bought a book from one of your popular bookshops, which was looking at law from the perspective of from India. And it was looking at Hindu Sanskrit roots. And I want to go read it. I want to understand the knowledge systems that arise from there and how we may or may not evaluate current laws practices in light of that knowledge. So my challenge to you is open up our minds and be prepared to go on a journey, to go on an exploration. Law isn't just about learning rules, learning principles of law, but it's about understanding a wider system of thinking about life, about our world, about our state. It's about thinking about core principles like justice, fairness, equity. What does that all mean? Does justice mean the same thing all the time to everyone? Could it mean different things to different people? When we think about the rule of law, what does the rule of law mean? Does it mean the same thing to everybody all of the time? And one of the examples I give when I talk about the rule of law is, I am a woman. And as women, there are so many things that are legalized in the laws that we obey, and it is the rule of law. But is that fair to me as a woman? Is that equitable to me as a woman? Is it fair that in so many jurisdictions, there are women who still cannot on their own properties? They cannot drive cars if they wish to. In some places, they cannot vote. But that is the rule of law because it is legal in those jurisdictions for those things to happen. So we're not just talking about historical injustices, we're talking about current injustices. And we want you to begin to explore that beyond that to different systems. Is it fair that companies can do certain things in certain circumstances and get away with it? Is it just? Okay, so when we begin to think about those principles, we want you to open up your mind and think about knowledge systems from a wider perspective than what you know. Because the worst possible thing that we can do in a world where information is so available, is that we remain myopic in our thinking and we never gaze and say, this is how it must be. There are lots of I'm coming to climate change, don't worry, it will all tie back in. There are lots of really interesting, positive things that I hear from India, that I read about India, that gets me excited about India. In the same vein, there are some reports in the news that I have heard, and I'm thinking, no, we must move beyond that. As a society, I see the work of women in this country. I see them in the media, and I say, well done. Because that is the work of justice. Advocacy is what we do law for. We make money along the way. That's fine. We need to make money. Yeah. But advocacy is what we do law for. Standing for social justice is why we do this job. Otherwise, you can do anything else. And thinking about that through the eyes of whatever area of law you are interested in is really important. Finally, just generally speaking broadly about law, our world has changed dramatically. Technology has changed our world. It has changed the way in which we work. It has changed ways in which we live. It has changed ways in which we interact with one another. What that also means is that technology has changed the place of law and the relevance of extant laws to current situations. I still remember when I did the law of evidence and we're trying to consider whether or not something was a primary evidentiary source. And we said photocopies are not primary evidentiary source. And we're trying to look at the case law to understand what is a photocopy and what isn't. In my day, it was easy. You could see it was very black. We had what we call cyclostyling. Yeah, and you roll it, and once you see a photocopy in court, it is so obvious. I know some of you are thinking, what on earth is she talking about? Yes, that is the world we now have, which is a primary document. If I create a document on my computer and I send it to 100 people, which is a primary document for evidentiary purposes. And so we begin to think, what does that mean? We are now having cars that are driverless. And we're thinking about rules of liability. Who is liable if something happens? Yeah, we can now create music drawing on so many people's work through AI. Who owns the intellectual property? But more importantly, even in the work that we do as lawyers, people can begin to fill forms and they get legal advice online. So what is our role as lawyers? So you see, your world is changing and you must be ready to take on that challenge. Now, we could do one of two things. We could get really bogged down and get scared and say, oh no, I'm not going to study law anymore because the computers are going to take over, AI is going to take over. And what I say is, and where do you think AI will not take over? The future is for those who can conceive and think about how we continue to become relevant and add value and utilize the tools that we have at our disposal in this current age. There is always something for somebody to do. And history is such a good thing. One of the things I've done, because I will be honest, I was a little bit anxious about AI. But then I went to read about the Industrial Revolution. And the same questions that we talk about today were exactly the same questions they were asking. Is industrialization going to take away all our jobs? Is industrialization going to make us irrelevant? And here we are, 2 centuries after, and we are still relevant. I think it is a power of the human mind and the human spirit that we are able to adapt, be flexible, and ensure that we begin and we continue to add value in light of changing circumstances. But we can only do so if we are ready and we are prepared to do so. And the starting point for that is in our learning systems. If we're not given the right questions to ask, if we don't explore the right questions and the right issues, if we remain in the laws of the past and try and understand our world through the laws of the 19th century, we are not going to be able to succeed. And so we must begin to ask the right kind of questions for the 21st century. And that brings me then to what we do at the Bradford School of Law and my research around climate change. At the Bradford School of Law, I've got some flyers here. I don't know, you may want to share. I just thought, I don't have enough. Sorry, I didn't think I'll have such a large room. But these are some flyers. It's just a brief flyer about our law school and some of the things that we do. At the Bradford School of Law, one of the things we're keen about is that we must engage with these emerging issues. So we have new programs on technology and law. We have programs that look at ESG and the corporate governance process. We have processes that begin to think about, like I said, how we decolonize the curriculum. We talk about fintech. So when we look at banking, we're not just looking at traditional banking. We have a brand new LLM on financial technology and banking. And we want to share that. We want to share that and learn from one another along the process. So when we come therefore to climate change and just transition, I don't think that I need to teach anybody what climate change is anymore. When I first started researching this, people look at you and say, climate change. But I think the recent past has shown us that climate change is happening, and it is happening to all of us. For decades now, the world has tried to grapple with this challenge. And the serious challenge that we have, I have notes, but I'm not going to go into them. I'm just going to talk. How many more minutes do I have? I have time. Good. Back in 1992, when we had the first United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, people were still questioning whether or not climate change was happening. But the world agreed that we were going to do something. We were going to adopt what we call the precautionary principle. And the precautionary principle says that if we think something is going to happen as a result of our activities that is going to be foundationally detrimental, that it is so serious, then we need to act even if we are not sure that that thing is happening. Okay? That is the precautionary principle, that we must act before we are sure, before science tells us beyond reasonable doubt that climate change is happening. That was 1992. Fast forward to 2023, we see extreme weather conditions, the same things that were predicted back in 1992. We see floods, we see fires, we see typhoons and tornadoes that are becoming more and more extreme. We see the Sahelian region becoming more and more arid. So we are experiencing climate change. We see countries in the Pacific regions being submerged. Yeah, we see your near neighbor, Bangladesh, losing some parts of their territory already to sea level rises. So these incidents around climate change is real, it is happening. Now, the science has told us that the way to address climate change is to address the cause of climate change. And the scientific consensus is that greenhouse gases are at the core of climate change. So we are releasing too much carbon into the atmosphere. And because we're releasing too much carbon into the atmosphere, we are causing a greening effect. That's why it's called greenhouse gases. You know, just like when you build a greenhouse and you plant your crops. Yeah, we're creating a greenhouse effect, and that leads to global warming. 2 weeks ago, I was talking to somebody, and he said, I agree with you now that climate change is happening. But I quarrel with you because you deceived us. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you know, all the time you said climate change will lead to global warming. I was very happy because I thought England is going to get much warmer and I'll have Mediterranean weather and I don't have to go away for my holidays anymore. Yeah? So a lot of people think, oh, climate change, if I live in cold environments, then of course it just gets a bit warmer. But that's not what it means. The greenhouse warming, and I'm not a scientist, I'm just saying what they say, messes up with the climatic systems and accelerates change in a way that is catastrophic to human experience here on Earth. Now, the problem of climate change is a human problem in the sense that we are the cause of climate change. Similarly, the impact of climate change is a human problem in that we are at the receiving end together with the other species that we share the earth with. The difference is that they are innocent. They didn't contribute to climate change. We did. But they are going to suffer as a result of climate change. But when we say it is a human problem and we say human beings have contributed to climate change, remember I talked about justice. What is fair? Have all human beings, all human systems, all countries contributed equally to climate change? And the answer is no, because remember we said climate change is caused by greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gas is caused as a result of industrial activities. And some countries have been industrialized a whole lot longer than other countries and have benefited from that history of industrialization. So we call them the developed countries. Yeah, and we are the developing countries. And so the climate debate since 1992 has been around who should be responsible for addressing the problem of climate change. Who should reduce their greenhouse gas emissions? In 1972, at the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, before climate change, but we're beginning to think about environmental concerns, there was a consensus that human activity was damaging the environment. But the question was, does that mean that we stop to develop? Those of us in the global south who were just beginning to become industrialized, how do we respond to that? And in 1972, Indira Gandhi, the then Prime Minister of India, said, listen, environment is a preserve of the rich. If you are at the very, very basic element of trying to find food, clothe your children, provide a roof over their heads, whether or not the water will be polluted, the trees you are devouring, that's a completely different issue. Because if you are engaging and battling with the issues around subsistence, how to live, then environment becomes something that is distant. And therefore, for us to all grapple with environment, we all have to have access to the means of livelihood, access to improving our quality of life. That was 1972. But the same debate comes to the fore when we talk about climate change. Because for us to address climate change, we have to reduce greenhouse gases. Where does greenhouse gases come from? From the fossil fuel industry mainly. There are other sources, agriculture and the like, but mainly from the fossil fuel industry. Our manufacturing systems, our energy systems, all of these things we produce come from fossil fuels. How can we develop without the energy from fossil fuels? If we are to move on to cleaner methods or forms of development, what will be the impact on emerging countries and poorer countries, especially when those emerging countries and poorer countries have not contributed in a similar vein to climate change? Yeah? Am I still connecting? I'm still connecting. Good. So, the other big question is historical pollution, but also current greenhouse gas emissions. If you look at the map of who are the biggest greenhouse gas emitters, some emerging countries have gone in there. China, for instance, has overtaken the United States as a current biggest emitter. And India is moving quickly to join the big league of emitters. Not so much yet. But the question we then ask is, fine, it's one thing to say, oh, China emits X trillion cubits of greenhouse gas and the US emits X trillion cubits of greenhouse gases. But wait a minute, have we taken into consideration the per capita emissions? Per capita, we all know what per capita is, what each individual is consuming in terms of energy or emission of greenhouse gases. And when you think about that, a question of justice comes. Because if you divide the total emissions in China relative to the population, you find that individuals are using less energy than they are in the United States or in the United Kingdom or elsewhere. So, how do you ask people to use even less when they are consuming less? Those become really big questions and challenges that we have to grapple with. So under the former Kyoto Protocol, there was a two-stage process where developing countries had less binding obligations, did not have binding obligations, and developed countries, what we call the Annex 1 countries, had binding obligations. But the Kyoto Protocol was coming to an end. And because it was coming to, and we had to agree on a new system. And at that time, it was said, look, because the emerging countries are all also beginning to consume a lot of energy and emitting greenhouse gases, there should be what we call shared responsibility. So we moved on from the common but differentiated responsibilities principle to that of shared responsibility, where we say everybody should contribute because we all must reduce greenhouse gas emissions if we are to move to a safer world. But again, we need to take that in perspective. So, for instance, the whole of Africa contributes about 4% to global greenhouse gas emissions. So, if Africa stops producing today and we go back to the Stone Ages, it will make no difference to current greenhouse gas emissions. And yet, as a continent, it needs the development, the energy to develop. How do we manage that? So the world agreed in Paris that we're going to support, just like they did under the Kyoto Protocol, under the Clean Development Mechanism. I'm not going to go into that, but if you're interested, write to me and we can talk one whole day about it, okay? Because I can't stop talking about these issues. I love talking about them. But in Paris, we agreed that we're going to have a climate fund, where we're going to support the least able countries financially and technologically to adapt and to begin to get to a point where they could also reduce their greenhouse gases. All countries agreed we're going to say, I'm going to reduce X amount, what we call the independent national contributions, the INCs. Every country volunteered to reduce by a certain level. But most developing countries said, but if we are to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, you have to assist us financially, technologically, to enable us achieve that target. So you and I see talk up today, that financial commitment has not come through. Of course, there have been challenges globally. We've had global financial crisis. We have a global war, a war going on in Europe. We have a lot of other issues that are challenging in our world. And countries all have immediate issues to consider. But in our world, we make choices. We never have enough. Just like in our personal lives, we never have enough. Whether you have 100 rupees or 1,000 rupees, it's never enough. You can spend all in the same day. So what we do is we make choices. If I have 100 rupees, what is my priority? Maybe I first think about my food, my health, my accommodation. If I have a bit more, maybe I go eat a meal. If I have a bit more, maybe I go buy some jewelry. If I have a bit more, maybe I buy gold. A bit more, maybe I buy diamonds. Yeah, you make choices. And as a global community, we make choices with the limited resources that we have. And the question is, what choices is the global community making around climate change? At the last COP that was held in Glasgow, I know that our Indian delegate got a lot of flack for standing up and saying, we're not going to sign up to the agreement, that the more stricter words around fossil fuels. I thought we should have tried that. But there was a reason why. Because in international law, it's always about international permanent interests. And your delegate was thinking about what India's permanent interests were. My position is that it didn't have to be either or. That if we work together, which is what the climate system is about, then we should come to a point where we can support the countries that need to develop but are not yet at a place where they could use cleaner energies to be able to access those cleaner energies. India is thinking we are developing at a fast pace and we need to be able to access energy in order for us to develop at that fast pace. If we take a step back now, it is going to impact on us. Should India carry on using dirty technologies? I don't think so. Or should India be supported to move on to cleaner technologies? I think so. And what is our global world doing about that? And that takes me to that concept of just transitions. The just transition concept is clearly identifying that as we move from fossil fuels, there are going to be winners and losers. That as we move away from fossil fuel, we can do it in a way that is not just. And if we do it in a way that is not just, that is not going to be fair to certain groups of people. And this group of people will first and foremost include countries that are producers of fossil fuels as a form of energy. Oil producing countries, coal producing countries. What we are telling them is you have a resource you can no longer use. So what is the option? Especially if that resource is their main source of revenue. In some countries, that industry accounts for over 90% of their GDP. So if we transit away from fossils, what will that mean? So it takes us what we call the energy trilemma. Three key things. That's why it's called a trilemma. Energy security, energy access, and environmental concerns. If we all move to away from fossil fuels today, do we have the technology or the alternative sources that will provide energy for us globally, across the world, that will ensure that we can have what we're doing now, that the lights will not go out? That is the question around energy security. How do we ensure that we have alternatives to fossil fuel that will support our development systems and processes? The second question is energy access. Fossil fuels, one of the advantages is that it is a cheap form of energy relatively. If we move on to green energy, how do we ensure that everyone still has access to energy, the poor especially? Because so many people in so many countries still do not have access to energy, even now. If we moved away from fossils, and we also tell them do not cut trees because you cannot use trees as fuel, do not use coal because coal is bad for you, how do they access energy? Are there in grids that can support their access to energy? Energy poverty becomes a really big problem. And then, of course, on the other side are the environmental concerns. But again, the environmental concerns are not just about the impact of the industry on the climate, but it is also the impact of the industry on the people who have lived in this environment where fossil fuels occur. What we find is that big business have carried on their activities in a way that is not necessarily good for the environment and the people who live in those environments. There is a lot of environmental pollution in the oil sector. And this is a report that I was part of. It's made up of a global consortium of about 5 universities across different continents, where we're looking at pollution in the Niger Delta of Nigeria. I will hand over a copy shortly. But what we found here is that when we move away from fossil fuel, if we move away from fossil fuels, what is the implication for the people who are steeped in pollution? And the way perhaps for me to get you to sort of think about that, as my colleague said, is around the Bhopal gas leak disaster. The Bhopal gas leak happened nearly 40 years ago. It's 39 years this year. Next year it will be 40 years. Until today, in Bhopal, there are victims of that incident. Victims because they carry long-term illnesses. Victims because water and land systems are still polluted. Victims because compensation issues and claims are still ongoing. How do we ensure justice for those people? If somebody has become, or as a result of the pollution in that environment, has become neurogenically or otherwise ill, they've developed cancers, how do we ensure justice for them? So just because a company closes, shuts down, stops to produce, and we move away, doesn't mean that we have transited. Yes, as the global world, we may transit, but the problems that they have that is in their DNA do not transit. So how do we ensure just transitions for them? And then, of course, we have employees, people who've worked in these sectors, who've trained in these sectors, that's the world that they know. And we also know that if you have an industry in a particular area, it is not just the people that the industry employs. It is all the people who service that industry as well. So if you have an industry here, you're going to have people who have accommodation that their workers go and live in. You're going to have restaurants that cook meals where people go and have a meal. People have drinks. So it's a whole industry that surrounds a multinational business. How do we ensure a just transition for them as well? Because if we simply shut the wells and we all move on, how is that just to them? When they've spent their life supporting a system that has supported us globally. So that is the core of the principle of just transition. We understand that we need to move away from fossil fuels. We understand that that is the way we address climate change. Everyone is agreed. I agree. But in doing that, how do we ensure that we address historical pollution? That we don't just shut the well and leave the pollution where it is. How do we ensure justice for those who are victims already, who carry in their very DNA, in their very bloodstreams, the impact of the industry? They cannot simply transit away. How do we ensure that employees, workers, industries, other businesses that rely on that sector are also supported into alternative forms of subsistence and livelihoods? That is at the core of the just transition principle. And it is really important for your generation. I tell my son that, well, I'm not too old yet, but I've lived long enough. And in another 20 something years, I kind of think like, I may be ready to say hello, goodbye. Okay? Maybe not happily, but it will mean a lot to me. But for your generation, it will mean a lot. And that is why your generation has to engage. And you have to engage with these issues not as an environmental lawyer. That is the mistake we make. We think that climate change, sustainability is about the environment. No. Climate change, sustainability is about human rights. It's about commerce. It's about politics. It's about corporate governance. It's about insolvency. So some of the things Dr. Shika was saying about when there is an insolvency, how do you manage your environmental problems? Links in some of the things I'm talking about. When you short the oil, how do you ensure just transition? So whatever area of law you intend to practice, trust me, there will be an element of sustainability that is central to you. And you have to try and educate yourself and get yourself to that place where you understand that. And at the School of Law, I'm going to stop now. Don't worry, I'm about to stop. At the School of Law, University of Bradford, and a lot of people challenged me when I did this. We developed our international law LLM programs. And I said, it doesn't matter what LLM you do, whether you're doing LLM in human rights, whether you're doing LLM in environment, in corporate governance, in banking, whatever, everybody takes a core module called Sustainable Development in Contemporary Law and Society. Business and society. Sustainable development, contemporary law, business, and society. Because if you intend to enter into a merger or an acquisition, those issues are there. If you're a human rights lawyer, there are human rights dimensions to pollution and the impact on victims. If you are a commercial lawyer and you're entering into a new contract, there's sustainable development context to that. And as lawyers, we all must work together, mainstream sustainability issues in whatever field we are in to ensure that we ensure a just and equitable world for us and for the generations that come after us. Thank you.
No, that's not done. Let's have a thunderous applause for Madam Ngobo. Thank you so much, Professor Ngobo, for the beautiful lecture. Well, everyone, Professor Ngobo and Professor Neeti, we all are live on different social media handles, and we are also live on YouTube right now. So your lecture has been seen by hundreds and thousands of people across the globe, yes. I'll shortly send you the link as well. Well, students, it's your time now. We will have a short interactive session. So the dais is now open for questions for Professor Ngobo and Professor Neeti. Students, please put up your questions for Professor. Any queries regarding your LLM programs or regarding environmental law, ma'am was discussing? You know what is just transitions, ma'am just discussed? Yeah, please. Ma'am. Harshit, can you come here and speak? Because it is also getting recorded. Yeah.
Ma'am, my question was that as a law student or as the future lawyers, what can we exactly do for the environment? Because it is true that our judiciary has made laws for the environment to protect it, safeguard it, but we still see so many companies that are able to cause loopholes in it to cause pollution. Now, I don't want to name any, but one culprit would be that of Nestle Corporation, how much pollution they're able to do. And our laws are mostly ineffective. So does that suggest that as lawyers, we are practically obsolete when it comes to environmental problems?
Thank you very much. I think that's a brilliant question. That is a really brilliant question. What is our role as lawyers? And I will say that our role, just like I said right at the end, is that in whatever spheres that we work in as lawyers, we play a role. So let's say you're negotiating an agreement, or you're the promoter of a business, and you are the lawyer involved in that. From the very beginning, we can begin to incorporate sustainability principles into that process. Okay? We can begin to utilize the provisions of your company's law and the responsibility of directors to ensure that they address sustainability concerns. If you are the law, so if you may be a corporate lawyer, but you cannot say, oh, I'm a corporate lawyer, so I'm not going to think about the environment at all. I'm just going to think about what is the best interest for the finances or whatever of my company. You've got to think about it in a holistic manner, because we are ministers in the temple of justice. That's what I think, as lawyers. And so we must be part of that. But beyond that, where you already have pollution occurring, there are lots of things we can do as well. We can advocate on behalf of victims. If we think about Bhopal, if we think about the Niger Delta, if we think about Ecuador, so many lawyers have advocated on behalf of victims, taking matters to human rights courts, both nationally and regionally, to try and get redress for victims. And there are frameworks that allow us to do that now. So for instance, if we think about the UN guiding framework for businesses, 2011, those principles, the 3 Ps, they allow us the respect principle. Everybody has to respect human rights. And there was a special rapporteur that was appointed that is linking environment to human rights. But that didn't start from the global north. In India, I never met him, but you had a famous activist lawyer, MC Mehta. And MC Mehta kept going to court again and again. And anybody who works in my space in environmental law knows MC lawyer as a supreme advocate. But one of the things he managed to do was that through his advocacy, he was actually able to fundamentally change the Indian constitution and its approach to environmental rights. So the right to a healthy environment was actually read into section 40 of the Indian constitution, not because the constitution itself was changed, but because through advocacy, through litigation, through public interest litigation, the courts interpreted that for you to have the right to life, you must have an environment that supports life. If I cannot breathe, you say, oh, you can live, but I'm going to suck all the oxygen out of this place. It's no good. So the Indian Supreme Court said the right to life itself is predicated on the right to environment. And therefore, if you must have the right to life, you must have the right to a healthy environment. That's how the right to environment became part of the Indian legal system. And that all came through advocacy. So those are some of the things that you can do. But beyond that, even within universities, as students, there are lots of soft processes, that we can do. In the modern age, we have so much at our disposal. We have media. You can record things. You have frameworks such as the global, what is it called? Compact. That was set up by the then Secretary General, where you can report things. Because one of the things that companies hate the most is their reputation. Companies want to say they're really, really good. That's why they do a lot of advertising. So the one thing they don't want is for you to advertise how bad they are. And young people, you can do that. You can help compliance agencies say, we went there, look at this water, see what we saw. You go investigate, push the regulators. Regulators do not always have resources, but sometimes they just, So you need to sort of push them a little bit to say, you can do a bit more. So you can form a society, a sustainability society in Amity Law School. yeah, where you can begin to do some of that work. So there's a lot that you can do using your voice, using your training, and using all the frameworks and networks that are available to you. Well, thank you. That's a very interesting question.
I may just add to you the advocate environmental position. You see large number of cases are coming for environment. You must have heard the tragedy of the Bhopal. Large number of cases have come, and one advocate, MC Mehta, you must have heard it, and he is commanding on environmental factors. Now mines cases are coming up very rapidly coming. They are coming up, and you will not even able to control it, because the nature of human rights and nature of environment are both are similar, and therefore if you will go environment as advocate, you will be successful. I hope. I have all the blessings to you. Thank you.
Do we have more questions from the students? You have a question? Yeah, yes, ma'am. Observation. Go ahead, ma'am. Please, ma'am.
Warm welcome again to the delegates who have specially come to Amity University and graced us. Spreading the fragrance from UK to India, I could not stop myself to just share a small expression and an observation. This is basically for all of you students, the global perspective in law. When we were hearing Madam, she was talking about Indira Gandhi. She did spoke about MC Mehta, and she did echo Supreme Court. So we must applaud Madam from speaking from an Indian perspective and bringing world to amity and taking amity to the outside world. This is really appreciative and admirable, and we all, on behalf of the respected members on the dais and my students, acknowledge the same. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, everybody, I'll inform Professor Ingobo and Professor Niti that we believe in advocacy, cultural integrity, inclusion, and diversity. And having said so, at Amity Law School, Noida, we have a highly structured legal aid and literacy committee. So, under the aegis of that, we have adopted 5 villages in Delhi NCR, where we provide free pro bono services 24/7. Well, everyone, let's clap for the elite dais that we had today. Thank you, everybody. It's time now to do the felicitations. I request His Lordship, Honorable Justice Rajesh Tandon sir, together with Professor Dr. Shefali Raizada ma'am, Additional Director, Professor Dr. Aditya Tomar sir, Additional Director, to do the felicitations. I'll request His Lordship and our Additional Directors to felicitate Professor Ingobu with a shawl. I'll request the students to stay back for another 5-6 minutes. We are doing the felicitations. We'll take a group picture. His Lordship felicitating Professor Ingobo. I'll request Professor Dr. Aditya Tomar and Dr. Shefali Raizada also to felicitate Professor Ingobo with a small souvenir from Amity University. I'll now request His Lordship and Additional Directors to felicitate Professor Niti Shikha with a shawl. Presenting a shawl as a token of her love and warmth. I'll request His Lordship and Additional Directors to present a souvenir of Amity University to Professor Niti Shikha. Thank you so much. Having said so, I'll request Aditya Tomar sir to felicitate His Lordship with a shawl and a souvenir of Amity University. His Lordship, thank you so much for gracing the occasion. And this is also a small souvenir from the Additional Directors. Thank you so much for gracing the occasion. This is on behalf of all the students who are here, on behalf of Amity Law School. Well, everybody, having said so, I'll now request our Additional Director and Joint Head, Professor Dr. Shefali Raizada ma'am, to present the vote of thanks. Please stop talking. The ma'am is going to present the vote of thanks. All the students here.
Very good afternoon. I take this privilege to propose the vote of thanks. We have in our philosophy, Atithi Devo Bhava. So this is the philosophy and tradition of the India. We greet our host and we cherish the moments of the togetherness. And with that cherishness and togetherness, with all gratitudes, I felt so much of happiness today to welcome here in Amity University, Bradford Law School, and with the representing the head of the law department, Mgovo Amish, professor of law, as a head of the department and director there, and also the Dr. Niti Shikha. Wonderful deliberations. I was thinking it was not a lecture based on the environment, but the complete cycle or complete circle of the human survival. How beautifully she has give the different versions of the environment, connecting with the technology, connecting with the human rights, connecting with the constitutional provisions all over the world, and how the developing and global developed countries are doing. She also talked about the responsibility of every country, because the environment is issue which cannot be understood in isolation. It is a complete cycle and connected with the survival of the humanity on earth. Such a wonderful, insightful lecture. I was listening very, very carefully and very beautifully interesting way and very effective lecture, I believe so. And a student, this is your time and testing of your listening skills. I was observing the students, what they are doing. So certainly those who have listened carefully, they must have been benefited out of these, because everything cannot be taught you within the four walls of your classes by your course faculty and with the fear of exam. Sometimes these effective lectures are very, very important for you, which gives you indirectly and leave the imprints in your mind. What Rishit was saying, what the lawyers can do. Yes, you are the first citizen. You are intellectuals. You may change the world. You may bring the transformation. So certainly it is responsibility for each one of you. Those who are sitting, certainly they have the advantage. They must have taken the advantage of this lecture. And I'm really must say a big thank you to Professor Mgovo for sparing time, giving so much of insightful, enriching deliberations on the various aspects. So thank you so very much being with us and here to deliver a lecture. I also thank Dr. Niti. As I told you, in a very few minutes, we got connected with each other in the lounge, and we felt so happy to meeting her and greeting her in Amity University. I'm very, very thankful and convey my gratitude to our founder president, sir, Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, who has provided these platforms so that we can enhance our knowledge, we can enhance our horizons of knowledge through these lectures. So thank you so very much, sir. We are really obliged for this. I must thank you, our chairman, Amity Law Schools, Professor Dr. D.K. Bandyopadhyay, sir. Though he was not here, he is engaged somewhere else. But certainly his support for all these lectures, very much there. Thank you, sir. And certainly our Lordship, Honorable Professor Justice Rajesh Tandon, sir, because very in one go, he has given and organized this. He is our mentor, he is our guide to give these platforms, not only you people, not only to the students, even to the faculty as well, for this kind of the events to organize, be the part of it. Certainly they are very, we should be very thankful, sir, to you for providing this. And Dr. Tomar, Dr. Bhavna, Dr. Akida, Dr. Sumitra, all they are in the organizing committee. Certainly we are We are thankful for providing this platform to ALS students and to all the faculty. So thank you, and big thank you to all the students. I believe the third semester is sitting and there's no end of learning. These are the various skills to enhance, and this is the best platform when you are listening some people around the world and having the knowledge. Thank you so very much, everyone.
Well, everybody, this is, as Shefali ma'am said, there is no end to learning. So we will continue learning, and under the aegis of Amity Judicial Academy and Amity Law Foundation, which is now headed by His Lordship, Honorable Justice Rajesh Tandon, sir. I'm sure we all will keep learning. Well, all those who are watching us live, thank you so much for making this lecture widely publicized across the globe. Thank you, Honorable Founder President Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, sir, for your blessings, cooperation, and support. Well, everybody, on behalf of Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, Founder President, Founder President, Amity Group of Institutions, goodbye and God bless to everybody who is watching us live. We can end the online session. And for the offline, everybody who's here, let us take a group picture with the illuminated dais. So, thank you so much. IT cell, we can now close the online session. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to IT people, ASCO, media, admin, HR, everybody. Ma'am has already proposed a vote of thanks. Thank you to all the students who made it. So let us take a group picture with Professor Engabo. All the students, you wanted to talk to ma'am, right? We all can disperse now, but we will click some pictures with the dais. All the students come here. Let us try to click.